Welcome back guys to a new episode of Mastering Programming. In this episode we're going to be creating some UI using TKinter and Python. We're basically going to be creating this very simple calculator here that allows you to put two different numbers, 1 and 2 for example, and you click add, subtract, multiply, divide, and the result will be displayed here. Now in this very short episode we're going to be creating the UI completely using Python, and then in the next episode we're actually going to be handling the functions. But in this episode you'll learn everything to do with this specific UI. Again, next episode we're going to be tying this to some actions. Let's get started. Welcome back guys. So the first thing we need to do is actually install some dependencies and tools that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and go to terminal from within PyCharm itself. I am using PyCharm. And the first thing we need to do is install something called pip env. So to do that we're simply going to say pip install pip env. And I already have this installed, so I'm not going to do it, but basically you need to write this in your terminal and then click on enter. What you need to do after you have pip env installed is simply type in pip env shell and then click on enter. Now if you're already running in a virtual environment, this might be unnecessary, but anyway, put the command down and click on enter, and it's not going to cause any damage even if you already have something installed. The last thing is have pip env install TKinter, and actually with Python 3 and above, TKinter comes already installed, and TKinter is what we're going to be using to create the UI. But if for whatever reason you can't import it, then this is the command that you're going to be putting, pip env install TKinter. Now let's actually get started by creating the UI for our new calculator app. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what exactly I'm writing. And the first thing we need to do is type in from TKinter, and as you can see I already have it, import, and we're going to put the star sign. And what the star sign does is that it allows us to import everything from that dependency or everything from that library. After that, just to save time, I'm going to be creating the 4 functions responsible for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So I'm going to do that by saying def and then addition.
And for now we're just going to say pass, def, subtraction, and pass allows us to not necessarily pass in any code inside that function, def multiplication, and we're going to be using these functions later on when we actually create our buttons, and then finally def division.
There we go. Now just to remove those white lines, let's click here and reformat file, and now we have that gone. Perfect. So now it's actually time to create our window or our UI. And to do this, the first thing we need to do is, I'm just commenting this so that you can see what I'm doing, is we're going to be creating a variable called window, and then we're going to say tk, and then 2 brackets. And if it shows you an error, maybe put t and select it from the menu if your Python is annoying like mine. After that, let's give this a title. So I'm going to say window.title. And inside of here, I'm simply going to say our calculator. After that, what we can do is we can simply go ahead and actually display this window. So I will say window.main loop. Now I just want to let you know, basically this is the window that we're going to be using, and main loop allows us to actually keep on running the window. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click here and run calc, and we should actually, we should have a window over here. So this is the one that we just created. Congratulations, you've created UI for your Python file. It's over here. And you can resize it, you can minimize it, basically everything. And this will work on Windows as well. But we want it to have that exact same size. So let's go ahead and do that. And by the way, our calculator, this is changed through the window.title. If I change anything here, this will change as well. Anyway, let's go now and add the same sizing so that the window naturally opens in this exact size. So I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say window.geometry. I'm going to open 2 different brackets, and inside of here I'm going to be adding the size that I want. So width, we want it to be 620 by 180. Now let's go ahead and run this again. Stop and rerun. Let's go back, and as you can see, now it ran and it launched our window to be exactly the same sizing as the one above. This is looking great, and as you can see, it's actually very easy to do. Now let's start by adding our labels, our text fields, and our buttons. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to be creating anything related to our UI between the window.mainLoop and window.geometry. The first thing I'm going to be starting with are these two labels and then the text field. Oh, sorry, the label and the text field, and then another label and a text field. So let's go ahead and actually just do that. We'll keep it simple and call it first text for the first label. And I'm going to say that this is of type string var. This is just a normal variable at this point. And then we're going to create a label. So we're going to say first label. And to display a label, to display this text like that, what we're going to be calling is label, open a bracket. Inside of here, we want to actually say that we want to display it in our window, which is this. You can call this anything, but I called it window, so I'll say window, bracket, text. And inside of here, we're going to put whatever we want to display over here. In our case, we want to put first number. So I'm going to say first number. For the font, we are going to make it a little bit big. So we're going to make it bold. And we are going to make it of size 14. You can change this to whatever you would like. And then I'm going to give it some padding of 20. There we go. Now, if we run this, nothing is actually going to happen, and you'll see why. If we go back, it's still not added here. And the reason for that is that we first need to add it to the grid. Basically, this window over here is called a grid for Python. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to go like this, and we need to say first label dot grid. We're going to open a bracket, and we're going to say row is equal to 1, and column is equal to 0. And we're going to say sticky is equal to W. Now, what does this mean? Let me explain to you. First of all, let's just run this. And as you can see, now we have first number appearing on our window or on our grid. Now, how Python or how TKinter works is that, imagine this is displayed as an Excel sheet. You will have different rows. So this is row 1, row 2, row 3, and row 4, or in programming, row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 3. And we have columns. So this is column 0, column 1, and column 2. We want to display this in the top left corner. So it will be in row 0, exactly as we have, or row 1. If we add row 0, it will just be higher up, but this still works. In row 1 and column 0, we want it to be at the very far left. Now, if I go ahead and change this to column 3, for example, and run this, oops, sorry. Because we don't have anything else, it will stay the same. Otherwise, you'll realize that it will start to change. Let's go ahead and keep it at 0, and I will elaborate more on this. Now that we have our label, we then need to add our text field, which allows people to enter anything inside. So I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do is now we are going to be saying first label equals to entry, and a text field is basically called the entry. So an entry is it's that field that allows you to put anything inside. I'm gonna go back and I'll say window text variable is equal to first text. So basically we're creating this text field, and we're saying that we want to save everything the user enters inside of the variable called first text, which is that one. Now what we need to do is we also need to do exactly what we did here and display this on the grid. So I'm going to do this by saying first label dot grid. And unlike this one, what I'm going to do is I will actually give it, I'll copy this, row 1, because we want it to be in the same level, so we want it to be on the same row, but column 2, like this. Now let's go ahead and see what will happen, but first let's remove this sticky. So I'll rerun. And as you can see, we now have our text field as well. So it's starting to look exactly the same as the top. Because this is exactly the same, I'll simply copy this and I'll come over here and I'll paste it. So let's just say first, and over here we're going to be saying, oops, second. And what we need to do here is exactly the same thing but collect for second. So I'm going to replace first by second. Same thing for basically all of them. Should have done that earlier. And for first text, what we want to do is we actually want to change it to the second text as well. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. Something else that we need to do is change the rows. So we want it to be in the same row, but a different column. So to do that, all we're gonna do is simply say 1 and 3. And let's run this and see how it will look like. Alright, so as you can see, we've got some mix-ups here. We've got the text field added, but we don't have the label, and that's because we also need to add this as 3. And we're going to run. Sorry, so we need to change this to column 1. And this to column 2. And this to column 3. And now if we run this properly now, as you can see, we've got this correct. So I was just mixed up. So this is row 1 because we all want it to be on the same line. But it's going to be column 0, 1. So 0 and 1, and then 2 and 3. Now let's move forwards to our result text here and the actual result that will change. This will always be the same, and this will actually change. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to come over here and we're going to say result so that we know exactly what we're actually programming. And basically all we need to do is simply say result label is equal to label. And then we're going to say window. We're going to say text. And we're going to say that this is equal to result. Equal, you can change this to be whatever you want displayed over here. And we're going to give it a font, so I'll say font is equal to, and we want it to be bold, and we want it to be of size 20. Now, as you can already guess now, we're going to have to add it to the grid as well. So I will be saying result label dot grid, and then I'm going to say where I want to display it. In my case, I actually want to display it in row 2, so I'll say row 2 and column 0. There we go. Let's go ahead and run this and see if everything is done correctly. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, it's now starting to look exactly the same. What we now want to do is we actually want to copy the exact same thing, and we're going to show over here. We can change this to being answer. So this is the actual text that will change to reflect the actual result. We want it to be in the same line, but we want it to be in column 1. And we're going to change this to being 0, 0, 0, 0. Perfect. Now I'm going to restart this and rerun. And now we have it exactly the same. What we want to do now is create the buttons. So I'm going to again put another comment and say buttons. Alright, so now we're basically going to be adding the buttons. So we're going to have 4 different buttons. We're going to start with the add button, and I'm simply going to say add and then btn. And then we're going to say it's equal to, and to create a button, we're basically going to say button. And then we want to present it in the window let's give it a text. So I'm going to say text is equal to, and I'll put parentheses so we can actually add the text that we want. And I'm going to simply paste this because I have that emoji, and yes, you can add emojis as well. Then I'm going to give it a width. So I want it to have a width of 12, so I'll say width of 12. And then we need to tell it basically what action or what function to call when it's pressed. So we're going to say command equal to addition. And now we're actually tying this button to that command, so to that addition function. So whenever it's pressed, whatever is in this function will start running. Next, what we need to do is we need to add it to the grid. So I'll say add button.grid. Again, open a bracket, and you guys should be experts by now. Row is equal to 3, and column is equal to 0. And let's give it a padding of 20. So I'll say padding equal to 20. Now I'm simply just going to be copying this 3 different times, and I'll say 1, 2, 3. Let's replace the add button with the subtraction sub button, and we want it to not have add, we want it to say subtract. Width 12 command, this time we obviously want to change it to subtraction. And row 3, again because we want it to be on the same line, but column is going to be column 1. And we only need to add the padding to the first one. This includes that one as well. And let's just change this to 2 and 3 because they're easy changes. And then we're going to be changing that one to multiply. And the function again to the multiplication one, which was called multiplication. This one, let's change the function to subtraction. Sorry if this is a little bit confusing. And let's go ahead and change the multiply text to say multiply, and then the divide to say divide. There we go. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it looks anything like what we should be receiving. So I'm going to click and stop and rerun, go back, and as we can see, we actually did it, guys. We did the exact UI to look exactly the same and exactly how we would want it. As you can see, if I click on it, you can see even interacts. I can type in some stuff as well, and it will look exactly how we intended from the beginning. So now the only thing left to do is going to be actually tying some actions to this. Meaning when we put a number here and there and we click on add, it gets added and the result gets presented over here. And we're going to be doing this in our next episode, releasing in just 2 days from now. So if you enjoyed this tutorial and if you really liked it, if you learned something new, please make sure you leave a like, leave a subscribe, and if you have any questions, leave a comment below. See you in the next episode.